the only difference between what a composer as such does and what an improvising composer does is that the composer has the benefit of time and an eraser. But all the same questions have to be answered. What key are you going to do it in? Fast or slow? Loud or soft? Many notes, few notes? Very intense and directed, or very laconic and relaxed? What emotional resonance are you trying to get across to people? In order to be clear as a composer, you need to master music. You need to have an analytical sense of how music operates. You need to understand how chord changes function and how rhythm interacts with chord changes. Excuse me. You need to answer all these very technical, mathematical, detailed, precise kinds of questions from the analytical side of your mind. And that alone is a lifetime study, right? At the same time, you cannot neglect your intuitive side, the side that wants to leap now and dance around and paint and is really the part of your consciousness that is leading you to desire to produce music in the first place, to take part in something that you've fallen in love with. It is music. You're not just going to say, oh, I read that book and now I understand it, right? Every once in a while somebody will say, oh, well, you know, man, it's just music. It's not rocket science. In fact, it is rocket science. And you don't understand rocket science just at the drop of a hat. So one's expectations need to be disciplined, charitable to yourself. You need to have a sense of the consciousness of taking your time and truly understanding all the parts. And it's no less true of your intuitive side. Today we will probably try to slow down the intuitive side because that's one thing that in a situation like this, less experienced singers probably will be able to do the most work with that, right? Because I'll be able to demonstrate some things. Surely but just for the complete novices who are here, and since we don't have that much time, just give me a C triad. So, one can start from as simple as the notes that are in a C triad. 3 notes, really, just 3. Yeah? And then you ask yourself, what melodies could I make out of those 3 notes? Da 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 da. Pretty simple. Still melody. Then you ask yourself, what other notes could I potentially add to those 3 notes? You know, good, yeah, right? They're not duds, right? But several housekeeping things that are, they're not peripheral because everything that we need to know about being a jazz singer has to do with what will create a live musical event. What we are as jazz singers is something that is unique among jazz musicians, and that is that we are equally performers. As much as we need to be musicians, as much as we need to be composers, as much as we need to do all the things that jazz musicians who handle instruments do, we are also the instrument. We are the vessel of communication. There's no saxophone, there's no piano to hide under if people hate us, there's no, and start throwing things or whatever. And it makes us very physically vulnerable. And it makes the imperative of how we present what we're doing that much more important for an audience. Now, just now, our friends here moved those out of the way, these stands. Why in heaven's name? And much of this has to do with just experience on the road. So these are young people, God bless them, but I would never come up here and stand here and sing with this, unless this was like nailed to the floor. Because why? For two reasons. One, people aren't paying to see this. People came to see me. And I don't want to have any impediment whatsoever between, I want to have as much transparency. What jazz musicians do can be very challenging for people. You need to remove every conceivable obstacle. Whether it's a physical obstacle, an emotional obstacle, a musical obstacle, you need to, that's why singing the words with clarity is a big deal. So people know what you're singing about, because it sometimes is very new and weird for people. So you move that, plus some people, when they're scatting, they start moving around and they're closing their eyes, and the last thing you want is an audience that's worried about this going into your eyes. You don't want to have your audience be afraid. And that, whether that's like, oh my God, the piano, you know, whatever. Don't, so, nope. Put them at ease and give them access. And the same thing is true of how many people in the world, neither one of you were really egregious about this, right? But singers, since they don't have a saxophone, need to know what they're going to do with their hands. And this is the most common thing. As though, like there's a shelf. They're leaning, but there's no shelf here. Here's the reason why people do this. What, I'll ask you, is behind here? The heart. The heart. The heart. This is what an audience wants. The single most important gesture in performance is, I love you. See, they believe me. Because first I do, but second of all, because I'm vulnerable to them, with myself, right? So, this is a big deal. And because ultimately, performance for a singer who is a jazz artist, ultimately what you need to do is integrate all the elements of your musical life, of your spiritual life, of your performance presentation, of your physiology, of your technique, because all of these things need to be integrated and ultimately will become integrated if you do your homework, then what we're talking about is what they call solid state, right? No moving parts. And the reason I bring that up is because when I do this, it reminds me, I'm first of all vulnerable to an audience, as we said, but second of all, my rib cage is up here and out of the way so that my diaphragm that's making all of the air produce, this is the motor, right? So if I do this, right away my spine is straight, so my physical technique is informing and is residing in the same place of comfort as what I'm doing as a performer, right? That's why I say it's solid state. I'm telling the story, I'm saying I love you, I'm making myself vulnerable, and I'm reminding myself to sing correctly. So all these things flow into one another very organically, all right? So really out here, but you're with your ears, and you're bifurcating your consciousness. It's here with them in performance, it's here with him as a musician. And then, check this out. Now, it'll be weird when we do it, but this is how much, now, when it comes to a count-off, because you didn't even give him a count-off when you went into time, right? So, and then he had to guess. Did you kind of have to guess?
Yeah.
He kind of had to guess. Not only when to go into time, but what tempo to use, right? So dig. I want you to exaggerate you'll dig what I'm doing, right? Let's say here we are, we're in performance, and I say to Metz, the greatest joy you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in re. Now, check out the difference. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in re. Right? Check this out. Greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in re. Now, so the amount of information that you can get over to somebody you don't even know from the count off is huge. And your collaborator deserves to know what temperature you want, what times, how you want it. And you as a musician deserve to have the, you deserve as an artist to declare, how you want it to go down and not take any portion of it for granted. Flowing with air. Now, by that exact token, let's put this down because your tuning went out a little bit, God bless you, when you got up high because you forgot to breathe right. And you noticed it too, right? Yeah. So, this, great, perfect. I'm glad you're here. So, I'll do myself first, right? Here's where, I touched on that before, but here's how I conceive of and work with air, right? Everything for me happens below the rib cage. Now you have your basic thing. Your diaphragm is the muscle that is usually flat, and it goes just underneath your rib cage down here. And when it moves down, it pulls air in to your lungs. When it pushes up, it pushes air out of your lungs. The best example I can give you that's visual is when you go to the park and you see dogs and they're running and then they come back and they drop the ball. They're not breathing. They're breathing down here because they don't have any concept about He-Man thing or anything like that. They just breathe the way God meant them to breathe. Singers need to breathe the right way too. So from the side, here, come on, here, give me hands. Right? So they can see. See how much work there is in that? Everybody see? Now, you may think I only need to have that much action when I'm singing maybe really loudly. But that's not true. You need sometimes even more support from here to sing softly and to really carry melodies over the bar line and over longer periods of time in order to successfully do that and to stay in tune, which is where our friend here got into trouble. So, come here again. And in your lonely flight, haven't you heard the music in the night? Did you feel that? When I went up higher, for a higher note, I actually pulled in with my diaphragm. Haven't you heard the music in the night? Wonderful music, fade. You see how much action there is there? Ideally, there's that much action every time. So sometimes when I get done with the big gig, I'm not tired up here. I'm tired here. I'm tired here sometimes when I'm working. Sometimes when I'm working, especially with a big band or a big orchestra like I did yesterday a couple of times, and I'm really out here and I'm doing all this stuff, if all the action is down here, whoo, man, I just gotta like this just so I can let it all go. Because it's all happening here. So, with you know what I'm saying? Let's try that middle section just at the bridge. Come here, don't be scared. Now, first I want you to give me this thing, right? Just give me really like tugging like that. Good. Now, you got the idea.
Yeah.
So now give me now. First, well, two things. Okay. First, give me, and in your lonely flight.
And in your lonely flight.
Okay, now you're still flat, darling. And here's why. Because she's still tensing. Right? So here, try it again. Breathe in through your nose.
And in your lonely flight.
There you go. So it's gonna. You're in tune now. Now if I had the time, we could work on also not being tied up here, because ultimately you want to be able to sing, and just like you're speaking, and you just look around and it's no big deal, and everything's happening, and you're perfectly all of this stuff. So breathing's a big deal. Huh. 45 minutes. Breathing's a big deal.